Across deserts, mountains, and forgotten plains, there are artifacts that shouldn't exist, objects carved with a precision we can't explain, statues buried in cities no one remembers, and tools made by hands we no longer understand. They aren't myths. They were found in the ground, catalogued, measured, and then quietly placed on museum shelves, as if their true stories were too strange to follow. Tonight, we open those shelves again, from giant basalt guardians to ivory knives etched with ancient battles, from underwater timber circles to colossal stone pillars. Each chapter brings us closer to the minds that shaped them. The colossal statue of Tel Halaf. In the dry plains of northern Syria, where the Khabur River cuts through rolling fields and stony hills, stood one of the earliest fortified centers of the ancient Near East, the Aramaean city of Guzana, known today as Tel Halaf. And from that forgotten world came a guardian carved from basalt, a towering figure that once watched over the palace of a long-vanished king. The colossal statue of Tel Halaf, created almost 3,000 years ago, remains one of the most striking examples of early monumental art, a figure shaped from volcanic stone, built not for worship alone, but for presence, fear, and memory. The people of Tel Halaf, carved in a style that blended power with symbolism. Their world lay between empires, Assyria rising in the east, Neo-Hittite kingdoms scattered to the west, and Aramaean tribes flowing across the plains. Guzana was a frontier city, a crossroads of languages, gods, and armies. In such a landscape, rulers built monuments not only to honor deities, but to assert identity. The Tel Halaf statue was part of this language of stone, a guardian placed at palace gates, carved to stand between the mortal world and the sacred. Shaped from dense black basalt, the statue depicts what appears to be a hybrid guardian, part human, part divine. Its broad shoulders, clenched fists, and forward-facing stance project strength. Its large, almond-shaped eyes stare ahead with a stillness that suggests eternal vigilance. The sculptor carved details into the hard volcanic stone with remarkable skill, the hair braided into heavy strands, the garment falling in sharp geometric patterns, the carefully shaped hands gripping symbols of authority. Basalt is one of the hardest materials available in the ancient Near East. Working it required extreme effort, pounding stones, bronze chisels repeatedly sharpened, and long hours of abrasion. That effort shows in the statue's weight and presence. It was not a decorative figure. It was a statement of control, protection, and continuity. Placed at the threshold of the palace, it would have greeted every visitor. Diplomats, merchants, warriors, and petitioners would have seen it as the embodiment of the king's power and the city's guardianship. What makes Tel Halaf so important is the way its art blends cultural influences. The Aramaean kingdom that built it absorbed styles from Hittite, Assyrian, and Mesopotamian traditions, yet its sculptures retain a local character. The colossal guardian's proportions, the blocky limbs, and the abstracted facial features reflect an early artistic phase not yet refined into naturalism. But its commanding posture and symbolic iconography show that the artist aimed for meaning, not realism. It is a vision rendered in stone, a being that exists between worlds, human, god, and guardian at once. The statue originally stood as part of a larger group, a procession of monumental figures, lining the palace entrance and courtyard walls. Archaeologists uncovered lions, sphinx-like creatures, heroic warriors, and mythic beings carved into orthostats and freestanding sculptures. Together, they created a ritual landscape meant to impress outsiders and protect the royal household. The colossal guardian was among the largest and most imposing of them. Basalt fragments found around the site suggest it once measured well over life size, its presence magnified by the architecture around it, tall gates, heavy walls, and decorated facades. When the kingdom fell in the 9th century BCE, the palace was burned. Many sculptures cracked under the heat, others collapsed beneath the rubble. The basalt guardian was shattered into pieces, its head, torso, and limbs separated as the palace roof collapsed. For centuries, the ruins lay buried beneath layers of ash and earth. Wind swept over the mound, plants grew over the stones, and the guardian slept beneath the dust of ages. When archaeologists eventually uncovered the site in the early 20th century, they found the statue in hundreds of broken pieces, some scorched from ancient fire. Yet even in fragments, its power was unmistakable. The weight of the basalt, the depth of the carving, the posture frozen in steadiness, all spoke of a monument intended to last beyond generations. Slowly, painstakingly, researchers collected the shards and identified each part. The guardian's face emerged, first broad, stern, timeless, then the torso, heavy with carved geometric design. Piece by piece, the statue returned. The reconstruction process itself revealed the skill of the ancient artisans. The basalt blocks fit together with surprising accuracy, showing that the statue had been carved from a single, massive boulder. The sculptor had envisioned the final form before the first strike, understanding where the natural veins of the stone lay and how to shape the figure despite basalt's unforgiving hardness. When, assembled, the guardian rises again in silence, its eyes unblinking, its posture fixed. It does not tell its story in words, but in presence. It carries the echo of a vanished kingdom and the weight of a culture that carved permanence into volcanic stone. What is most striking about the colossal statue is not its size alone, but its stillness. There is no motion in the carving, no gesture, no dramatic movement. It stands upright, unwavering, as if holding its ground not for years or centuries, but for eternity. This stillness is intentional. It expresses the ideal of a guardian who does not waver, a divine protector whose gaze never leaves the horizon. In many ancient cultures, guardians were not passive statues, they were believed to hold real power. Their gaze protected the palace, their symbolism anchored the king's legitimacy, and their presence connected the human realm to the sacred. The Tel Halaf guardian belongs to this tradition. Its clenched fists likely held ritual objects. Its eyes, once inlaid, may have reflected torchlight at night. Its position at the palace entrance ensured that every entry was an encounter, a moment of awe, humility, or fear. Standing before the statue now, one can still sense the intention behind it. The basalt absorbs light rather than reflecting it, giving the figure a dark, grounded quality. Time has softened some edges, but the core remains strong, still, unbroken. The guardian's face, weathered yet expressive, seems to watch with a patience measured in millennia. The colossal statue of Tel Halaf is more than a relic. It is a testament to a civilization that sought to shape power in stone, to create guardians that would endure long after their builders were gone. It carries the memory of a burned palace, a fallen kingdom, and an artistry that flourished in the shadow of empires. Even shattered, it survived. Even buried, it waited. And now, standing once more, it speaks the same silent message it was carved to hold. That stone remembers, even when cities do not. The Gebel el Arak knife, across the shifting desert light of Upper Egypt, where sand meets the slow bend of the Nile, a single object has carried more questions than answers. Not a monument, not a tomb, but a knife small enough to hold, yet carved with scenes that feel far larger than its size. This is the Gebel el Arak knife, a ceremonial blade from around 3,300 BCE, created at a time when Egypt was still forming its first kingdoms. It was not found in a royal tomb or palace. Instead, it surfaced unexpectedly in the early 1900s, purchased from a local farmer who had kept it among his belongings. Only later did archaeologists realize it was one of the most extraordinary artifacts ever discovered from Egypt's pre-dynastic era. The knife consists of two parts, a finely chipped flint blade, and an ivory handle carved with scenes that seem to come from two worlds at once. The flint, the same material used for tools and weapons, was shaped with such precision that the edge remains, nearly perfect, even after 5 millennia. But it is the handle that draws the eye, because the designs carved into it show a level of sophistication and symbolism that feels almost out of place for its time. One side of the handle depicts a figure wearing a long cloak and a round, brimmed cap, an appearance unlike anything in traditional Egyptian art. He is often called the master of animals, shown gripping 2 lions that rear beside him. This image, where a central figure controls or restrains wild beasts, is common in early Mesopotamian art, but rare, almost absent in Egypt before later periods. This single detail raises a quiet but persistent question. How did Mesopotamian imagery appear on an object deep in Egypt before the first pharaohs? The carving is meticulous. Every strand of the lion's manes, every fold of the man's cloak, every detail of his posture is deliberate. The carver's hand was steady, confident, suggesting both skill and a deep understanding of the material. Ivory is unforgiving, one wrong cut, and the piece cracks. Yet here, the lines flow with ease. The other side of the handle shows a different scene entirely. Instead of mythic imagery, it depicts battle figures locked in conflict, bodies intertwined, weapons raised. The style again resembles early Mesopotamian compositions rather than the emerging artistic traditions along the Nile. Ships appear as well, long and narrow, similar to vessels known from the Arabian Gulf. Together, these images suggest a world where Egypt was not isolated, but connected through trade, movement, and ideas that flowed long before written history. To understand the knife, archaeologists examined it under magnification. What they found were minute details impossible to see with the naked eye, tiny cuts indicating that multiple tools were used, each with a specific purpose. The artist carved the surface in layers, starting with broad outlines and working inward to place the details. Even, the expression on the lions' faces is clear, teeth bared, heads tilted, bodies alive with tension. The blade and handle were likely made by different craftsmen. The blade shows Egyptian craftsmanship napping traditions that go back thousands of years. The handle, however, feels foreign. Its style, composition, and motifs align more closely with influences from the Tigris-Euphrates region. Scholars propose that the handle was either carved by a foreign artisan in Egypt or imported from the East and later joined to the blade. Either way, the knife becomes a silent witness to early cultural exchange, a reminder that ancient civilizations were not separate worlds, but overlapping networks. Despite its martial imagery, the knife was never meant for combat. The flint blade is brilliantly shaped, but shows no signs of use. The edge is untouched, the point intact. This was a ritual object, crafted to be admired, carried, or offered. In early Egypt, such pieces were often placed in graves or used in ceremonies tied to kingship, protection, or divine authority. The Master of Animals motif hints at symbolism, one where the figure represents control, power, or cosmic order. In later Egyptian belief, such themes appear again in different forms: gods restraining serpents, kings conquering chaos. The Gebel el-Arak knife may be one of the earliest expressions of this idea. The battle scene on the opposite side adds further intrigue. Figures are shown in close combat, arranged in rows like an organized narrative. Some appear to be prisoners, others attackers. Ships beneath the fray suggest movement, perhaps invasion, perhaps ritual, perhaps memory. The knife does not reveal which, only that its maker lived in a time where conflict and myth blended into a single story. What makes the object so compelling is the contrast between scale and significance. It is small, easily held in the hand, yet it carries layers of meaning: political, religious, artistic, cultural. Every carved surface is a window into a world on the brink of forming its first kingdoms, a world where ideas traveled across long distances before borders existed. When the knife arrived in the Louvre Museum, conservators cleaned the ivory carefully, preserving its warmth and fine grain. Under proper lighting, the carvings appear almost alive, the shadows inside the grooves shifting as though the figures move. Time has worn the surface, but it has not erased the intent of the sculptor. For archaeologists, the Gebel el-Arak knife is more than a beautiful artifact. It is a timeline carved into ivory, bridging two early civilizations. It shows that long before writing united Egypt, long before the pyramids rose, people were already sharing stories, symbols, and skills across vast lands. And yet, many details remain unanswered. Who owned it? Why was it buried far from any great city? What rituals did it accompany? Was it a diplomatic gift? A prized possession of a chieftain? A ceremonial item used in emerging religious practices? The answers lie beyond reach, but the questions remain part of its presence. Today, the knife stands as one of the earliest masterpieces of carving from the ancient world, an object shaped by skilled hands that understood beauty, power, and symbolism long before history was written. To look at it closely is to glimpse the first sparks of a culture discovering its identity, influenced by lands both near and far. The Gebel el-Arak knife is quiet, small, and delicate, yet it carries a world within it. It holds not only the story of early Egypt, but the memory of connections that stretched across deserts and seas, long before the world we know began to take form. The Megiddo ivories across the Jezreel Valley of northern Israel, where wheat fields stretch into the horizon and the air carries the dry warmth of the Levant, lies a mound known as Tel Megiddo. Today, it looks like little more than a gentle rise in the landscape, but buried inside it is one of the most important archaeological sites in the ancient Near East, a place that witnessed empires, battles, and centuries of trade. And within its ruins, archaeologists uncovered one of the most delicate discoveries ever found there: the Megiddo ivories. These ivories are not monuments or giant structures. They are small pieces, carved plaques, inlays, boxes, furniture decorations. Yet each one feels like a window into a vanished world of royal courts and refined craftsmen. When they were unearthed, many were broken, burned, or scattered, as if time had pulled them apart. But even in fragments, their meaning remained clear. Megiddo was not only a fortified hilltop, but a center of wealth, art, and international connection. The ivories were found mostly inside what archaeologists call the Palace 6000, a large elite structure from the late Bronze Age, around 3,300 years ago. At that time, Megiddo stood at the crossroads of the ancient world. It sat between Egypt's empire to the south, the Hittite lands in the north, and the inland kingdoms of Canaan. Because of this, it became a place where ideas, languages, and goods flowed in every direction. The Megiddo ivories are a reflection of that flow. Most pieces are carved from elephant ivory, imported from Africa, or hippopotamus tusk, likely from the Nile. Some have traces of gold leaf, others show hints of paint. Many were once attached to wooden furniture chairs, chests, boxes belonging to the Canaanite elites who ruled the city. Their themes reveal a world deeply influenced by international art. Egyptian motifs appear everywhere: lotus flowers, falcons, scenes of hunting, women holding, mirrors, and graceful animals carved in motion. But the craftsmanship is distinctly local, a Canaanite interpretation of Egyptian royal imagery. This blending of cultures shows how interconnected these kingdoms were long before classical history was written. One of the most famous pieces from Megiddo depicts a reclining woman holding a lotus blossom. Her posture mirrors Egyptian banquet scenes, but her body proportions reflect Canaanite artistry. Another plaque shows lions attacking prey, carved with fluid, confident lines that reveal the carver's deep familiarity with animal anatomy. There are also pieces with geometric patterns, rosettes, birds, sphinxes, and griffins, symbols of authority and protection. Each item likely served a dual purpose: beautiful to look at, but also a statement of power. Owning ivory was a mark of status. In an age where metal was expensive and luxury goods rare, ivory signaled wealth, connection, and influence. A ruler displaying furniture, decorated with imported ivory, was showing not only taste, but reach, proof that traders, caravans, and ships connected him to distant regions. The story of the ivories is not only artistic, but historical. Megiddo eventually faced destruction. Fire swept through parts of the palace complex, collapsing roofs and burning wooden furniture. As the beams fell, the ivories slipped between cracks in the floor or shattered under the heat. Some were charred but survived. Others were buried in ash layers, preserved by the same destruction that ended their use. When archaeologists found them in the early 20th century, many pieces were fragile, brittle, and blackened. Restoration teams later spent years reassembling them, tiny fragments of ivory fit together like puzzles, slowly revealing scenes lost for millennia. The work was painstaking, but it revived an artistic tradition that had been silent since the Bronze Age. The ivories also tell us about Megiddo's role within the wider late Bronze Age world. At this time, Egypt controlled much of Canaan. Egyptian administrators lived in local cities, and local rulers acted as vassals. Many ivories from Megiddo likely came as diplomatic gifts or tribute. Others were commissioned locally by artisans trained in Egyptian workshops. The mix of styles is a sign that Megiddo's elite were deeply integrated into the politics of the time. But there is another layer beneath the historical one, the human layer. These ivories were handled, admired, touched, and used. They sat in the palaces of rulers who lived through real struggles, economic tensions, rivalries, alliances, and eventually collapse. When the palace burned, it was not simply objects that fell into ash, but the memory of a society that had once been connected to every corner of its world. Walking through the excavation site today, the palace floors are exposed to the sun, the walls reduced to low lines of stone, It is hard to imagine the place filled with life, music, colorful fabrics, and carved ivory gleaming in lamplight. But the ivories make that world tangible again. They are small enough to hold in one hand, yet powerful enough to speak for an entire age. Their designs also carry a sense of continuity. Even after Megiddo declined, the artistic traditions it participated in continued across the Levant. Carved ivories appear later in Samaria, Phoenicia, and Syria, always tied to elite culture, always symbols of connection. The Megiddo ivories were part of the earliest wave of this tradition, showing how far back the roots reach. Many questions remain unanswered. Who carved them? Were they imported, finished, or made locally? Why were certain motifs chosen? And how many pieces were lost to fire or time before excavation began? These uncertainties are part of the ivory's quiet mystery. They are fragments that require imagination not to invent myths, but to understand the skills, networks, and values of the people who lived here. The Megiddo ivories are not monumental like pyramids or temples, but they reveal something equally important: the intimate scale of ancient life. They remind us that power is not only measured in large structures, but also in small objects crafted with care. They show that even thousands of years ago, beauty traveled across borders, shaped by hands that believed art could express status, identity, and belief. In the gentle light of museums today, the restored ivories look delicate, their surfaces smooth, their carvings crisp. But behind that calm appearance lies the full story of a living city, a palace filled with sound and movement, and the craftsmen who translated their world into patterns and forms on ivory. Through them, Megiddo speaks not with walls or weapons, but with the quiet clarity of art, a reminder that the smallest artifacts can carry the greatest echoes. The anthropoid coffin of Judah, across the coastal plains of ancient Canaan, where shifting sands hide layers of forgotten kingdoms, archaeologists uncovered a burial unlike anything expected from the region. It was not a simple stone box or a pottery jar. It was a life-size coffin shaped like a human being, sculpted, molded, and designed to hold an individual who must have carried status, power, or fear. This was the anthropoid coffin of Judah, a rare Philistine period burial that tells a much larger story about identity, influence, and the blending of cultures thousands of years ago. The coffin was discovered in the southern Levant, in a landscape that has seen countless rulers: Egyptians, Canaanites, Philistines, and later Judeans. Yet this particular burial did not clearly belong to any one group. Instead, it sat at the crossroads of traditions, echoing artistic choices from Egypt while remaining firmly rooted in local customs. Its style was unmistakable: a human-shaped sarcophagus, complete with facial features, shoulders, chest, and a stylized wig. It looked like something one might expect to find near the Nile, not in a Judean hillside. The coffin was made of clay and limestone plaster, shaped carefully around the body it once held. Its face is calm and expressionless, almost mask-like. The eyes are almond-shaped, the nose broad, and the mouth slightly curved, as if the sculptor intended a neutral dignity. Along the sides are faint traces of paint, long faded, suggesting that the coffin may once have been decorated in colors now lost to the soil. Anthropoid coffins of this type appear across the eastern Mediterranean, particularly in regions influenced by Egyptian burial practices. Yet the version found in Judah carries its own identity. It lacks the inscriptions, magical spells, and elaborate iconography typical of Egyptian coffins. Instead, it emphasizes form, the human shape itself, as though the sculptor was more concerned with presence than narrative. It is quietly powerful, neither ornate nor simple, and unmistakably intentional. The individual inside the coffin was buried with objects that reveal a world of shifting alliances. Pottery, typical of local Canaanite communities, lay beside imported goods. Cypriot ceramics, bronze tools, and beads made far to the north. These objects suggest a society with trade routes, connections, and cultural conversations that spanned continents. Whoever this person was, their burial reflects privilege. Only elite individuals were laid to rest in anthropoid coffins, especially outside Egypt. When archaeologists examined the coffin closely, they noticed something striking: the craftsmanship was both careful and experimental. The sculptor had worked the clay by hand, pressing it around a frame, smoothing it with water, and shaping the face with fingers and simple tools. Unlike Egyptian stone coffins carved by specialized artisans, this one carries the marks of a local hand learning from foreign influence. You can see the human touch in every ridge, every curve, every uneven detail. It is not the work of a workshop, it is the work of a cultural transition. This raises a larger question. Why were anthropoid coffins used here, in Judah? The answer lies in the political landscape of the Late Bronze and Early Iron Age. At the time, Egypt exerted strong influence over Canaan, controlling cities, trade routes, and local rulers. Egyptian officials, soldiers, and administrators lived in the region, bringing with them their customs, art, and burial practices. Local elites, seeking status, may have adopted certain Egyptian traditions as a sign of prestige or allegiance. Yet this coffin is not Egyptian. It does not try to imitate Egypt perfectly. Instead, it blends taking the idea of a human-shaped coffin, but interpreting it in a local language. It represents a moment when cultures met, merged, and created something new. This fusion is what makes the find significant. It reflects how identity was negotiated in a world of empires. Inside the coffin, the skeleton was remarkably well preserved. The bones show signs of age and wear, possibly belonging to a middle-aged or older individual. The burial position, offerings, and placement within the tomb all point to someone respected, perhaps a local leader, a merchant with far-reaching connections, or a person who served as a link between different cultural groups. The coffin also sheds light on something more personal, how ancient people approached death. In many cultures, a human-shaped coffin was not just a container, but a symbolic body, a vessel for the spirit's journey. Its shape protected the individual in the afterlife, ensuring that they remained whole, recognized, and present. Even without inscriptions or carved prayers, the form itself carried meaning. It was a quiet statement of dignity. The burial site around the coffin offered additional clues. Nearby tombs contained more traditional Canaanite burials, simple pits, jars for children, stone-lined chambers. That contrast makes the anthropoid coffin stand out even more. It was not part of a shared tradition but a deliberate choice, perhaps signaling a family with unique connections or a generation living in a period of change. Archaeologists also found small objects likely used during burial ceremonies. Bowls, with traces of offerings, lamps, and fragments of textiles. These items hint at rituals performed before the tomb was sealed, rituals rooted in local practices rather than borrowed ones. Even with a coffin that looked Egyptian, the people who buried the dead held on to their own customs. Standing before the coffin today, with its smooth curves and softly carved face, you sense its quiet power. It does not attempt grandeur, it carries presence. It represents a person, a moment, and a society balancing between worlds. It is both familiar and foreign human in form, yet mysterious in purpose. The anthropoid coffin of Judah remains one of the most intriguing archaeological finds of the southern Levant. It bridges cultures, embodies transition, and reveals how ancient communities absorbed influence without losing themselves. In its silence, you can feel the weight of changing worlds, not through kings or wars, but through one burial, one life, and one sculpted form meant to endure. And in that endurance, the coffin still speaks of identity, belief, and the human desire to be remembered not as symbol, but as self. The statue of Idrimi. In the ruins of an ancient city near the modern border of Turkey and Syria, archaeologists uncovered a statue unlike any other from the Bronze Age. It was life-sized, carved from pale limestone, and seated with a posture that felt strangely modern calm, reflective, almost conversational. This was the statue of Idrimi, ruler of Alalak around 1500 BCE. And what made it extraordinary was not only its craftsmanship, but the story carved across its surface. The statue was found in fragments in 1939, buried inside a ceremonial pit in the ruins of Level 1 at Alalak. Whoever placed it there did so with purpose, surrounding it with ash and pottery. When its pieces were reassembled, what emerged was the image of a man sitting on a throne, his feet resting on a small stool, his beard carved in the style of northern Syria's kings. But the most remarkable detail was not visual at all. The statue's body is covered in hundreds of cuneiform lines, forming one of the earliest autobiographies in human history. The text begins with a simple sentence that opens a window into an entire forgotten world. Idrimi describes how he was driven from his city as a young man, forced into exile after political upheaval. Rather than disappearing into obscurity, he took refuge among nomadic tribes in Canaan. He lived with them for years, learning their customs, earning their trust. It is a rare moment where ancient kingship feels human, a ruler remembering the years before power, remembering uncertainty, survival, and loss. After gaining the support of local communities and foreign allies, Idrimi returned to northern Syria and reclaimed his rightful throne in Alalakh. According to his inscription, he rebuilt the city, formed alliances, and restored stability. It is one of the few texts from the late Bronze Age that allows us to hear a ruler speak directly, unfiltered by myth or later retellings. The statue is not just a monument, it is a testimony carved in the first person, offering a perspective rarely preserved from this period. Archaeologically, the statue offers clues about the world Idrimi lived in. Alalakh, a kingdom at the crossroads of Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and the Levant, was a place where cultures mixed Hittite, Hurrian, Canaanite, and Amorite influences all appear in its remains. The throne on which Idrimi sits is carved with symbols reflecting this blend. Lions along the sides, rosettes on the back, and geometric patterns that speak to broader Near Eastern traditions. The limestone used for the statue was likely quarried locally, but the style suggests craftsmen familiar with the artistic schools of northern Syria. The beard is long and carefully detailed, a sign of nobility. The eyes are slightly wide, typical of the period stone carving. The hands are folded calmly in the lap, a posture that signals authority without aggression. Nothing about the statue is exaggerated. Its power lies in its realism, its humility, and its willingness to speak through words rather than symbols. The cuneiform inscription reveals more than political events. It reflects the worldview of a king who saw legitimacy not only through birth, but through personal merit. He describes how the gods of Alalakh recognized his devotion, how he made offerings to them, and how he believed his restoration to the throne was both destiny and reward for perseverance. It is rare to find such introspection carved onto a royal monument. For historians, the Idrimi inscription is a unique resource. It mentions treaties, conflicts, alliances, and migrations across regions that were otherwise known only through fragmentary texts. It describes life among the Hapiru tribes, a group referenced in many ancient sources, giving insight into societies that often remained invisible in archaeology. It provides a glimpse into how rulers understood their responsibilities, their struggles, and their relationships with both gods and subjects. The statue also raises questions. Why was Idrimi's likeness broken and buried centuries after his reign? One theory suggests ritual retirement, that when new rulers or new dynasties emerged, earlier statues were respectfully removed and buried, rather than destroyed. Another theory points to political conflict. Perhaps invaders toppled the statue but did not destroy it fully, leaving the remains to be preserved by chance. The burial pit, however, seems intentional. Objects placed around the statue included ceremonial vessels and burnt offerings, implying a final ritual meant to honor the king rather than erase him. Even after thousands of years underground, the lines of cuneiform remain legible. When read from top to bottom, they feel almost like a spoken voice. Idrimi recounts the despair of his exile, the hope of return, the rebuilding of temples, and the treaties he negotiated with neighboring powers. He even mentions the people he thanked: craftsmen, advisors, and allies who supported him. In a world where kings often spoke through myth and divine imagery, Idrimi instead speaks as a human being. That honesty makes the statue feel strangely alive. Today, the statue stands not only as a representation of a king, but as one of the most intimate artifacts from the Bronze Age. It captures the story of a man navigating upheaval, exile, negotiation, and homecoming. It captures a moment when rulers explained themselves in plain words, not just through symbols or monumental architecture. And it captures the cultural landscape of northern Syria, a network of cities, alliances, and rituals that formed one of the great crossroads of the ancient world. In the quiet expression of the limestone figure, you can sense the weight of leadership, but also resilience. The gaze, though simplified by the sculptor's tools, seems directed inward. Nothing about the statue feels triumphant or boastful. It feels reflective, thoughtful, aware of the fragility of power and the importance of legacy. The statue of Idrimi remains one of the clearest voices from a world that otherwise speaks in fragments. In the lines carved across his body, a single life becomes a bridge between archaeology and lived experience. And through that bridge, the city of Alalakh, once powerful, then forgotten, finds a way to speak again. The giant sarcophagus of Ahmose, In the quiet desert west of the Nile, just beyond the cliffs of Abydos, lies a structure dedicated to one of the most important turning points in Egyptian history. Here, inside a burial chamber that still feels heavy with the weight of time, rests one of the largest and finest stone coffins ever carved in the ancient world, the giant sarcophagus of Pharaoh Ahmose. Ahmose, I was the ruler who ended Egypt's second intermediate period, expelled the Hyksos, and founded the new kingdom, the age of the great temples, colossal statues, and an empire that stretched far beyond the Nile Valley. His reign changed everything, and his burial reflects that shift. When his tomb was constructed, the artisans were not simply building for a king, they were building for the beginning of a new era. The sarcophagus itself is carved from massive limestone, cut so precisely that even now, centuries later, the surfaces look almost polished. It is monumental, in scale over 3 meters long, with thick, heavy walls that must have taken teams of workers weeks to shape and smooth. Ancient masons carved deep recesses into the lid, forming protective deities and inscriptions so that, even in death, Ahmose would be guarded from danger. The craftsmanship reflects a kingdom regaining its strength, rediscovering its confidence, and investing that energy in the legacy of its founding pharaoh. Ahmose's sarcophagus is not decorated with the elaborate artistry we see in later New Kingdom burials. Instead, the design is sober and powerful. The lines are clean, the proportions balanced, and the figures of protective goddesses, Isis, Nephthys, Neith, and Serket, stand carved against the stone with a quiet authority. Their forms were not meant to amaze. They were meant to endure. The simplicity carries its own kind of strength, reflecting a moment when royal iconography was shifting, evolving from the earlier styles of the Middle Kingdom into something larger, more ambitious. What makes this sarcophagus remarkable is not only its size, but its context. During this period, Egypt was rebuilding after foreign rule. Tombs had been looted, temples damaged, and royal traditions disrupted. Ahmose's burial marks the re-establishment of a confident, unified Egypt, a nation once again investing in stone, permanence, and the divine connection of kingship. Inside the carved chamber surrounding the sarcophagus, archaeologists found fragments of objects that hint at the rituals performed. Jars that once held oils, remnants of cedar boxes, and pieces of funerary equipment that accompanied the pharaoh into the afterlife. The sarcophagus also reveals signs of reuse and disturbance, the fate of many ancient tombs. Over the centuries, the chamber was entered, inspected, robbed, and sealed again. But despite everything that happened above ground, dynasties rising and falling, capitals shifting, foreign powers arriving, the sarcophagus remained where it was placed, immovable and enduring. Even the forces of erosion and collapse affected the surrounding chamber more than the coffin itself. It sits heavy and quiet, as if anchored into the earth. The limestone chosen for the sarcophagus is remarkably fine-grained, allowing for crisp carving and a smooth finish. The quarry workers who extracted it understood its quality. Transporting such a massive block from the quarry to the tomb would have required planning, sledges, manpower, and a coordinated workforce, proof of the administrative strength Ahmose restored to Egypt. With this coffin, we see not only a burial, but the machinery of the state coming back to life. Archaeologists studying the sarcophagus note the subtle details that reveal the transition into the new kingdom. The goddesses carved on the sides show an early version of the style that would later dominate Thebes. The proportions of the lid, slightly curved, like the roof of a shrine, anticipate the later anthropoid coffins that would become standard for royal burials. Even the placement of the coffin within the tomb reflects developing ideas about the journey into the afterlife, the alignment with cardinal directions, the use of protective spells, and the architectural choices of the burial chamber. Standing before it today, one feels the weight not only of stone but of history. The sarcophagus marks the end of a turbulent period and the beginning of an age that would produce Hatshepsut, Thutmose III, Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, and Ramses II. Without Ahmose, there would be no Valley of the Kings, no great temples of Karnak, no Egyptian empire at its height. His sarcophagus is the physical symbol of that turning point, a monument to the moment Egypt restored its identity. Even with the damage and erosion of time, the limestone still holds the traces of the chisel marks. When light strikes its surface, the carved forms of the protective deities appear almost in motion. The interior cavity, where the pharaoh once lay, is smooth and carefully shaped, suggesting the placement of linen-wrapped remains, amulets, and funerary equipment. Though the mummy of Ahmose was later moved and reburied with other royal mummies, his original resting place retains the solemnity of purpose that defined his reign. The sarcophagus also reminds us of how the ancient Egyptians viewed kingship. To them, Ahmose was not only a man but a bridge, the one who reunited the two lands, restored divine order, and connected the living world to the eternal one. The massive coffin not only protected his body, it represented the stability he brought, the strength he re-established, and the belief that the king's presence would continue guiding Egypt even after death. In the dimness of the burial chamber, the giant sarcophagus of Ahmose stands like an anchor in time. Its silence is not empty, it carries the history of a restored kingdom, the labor of hundreds of hands, and the belief in a world beyond death that shaped Egyptian civilization for centuries. It is one of the earliest monumental sarcophagi of the New Kingdom, a starting point from which royal funerary architecture would grow in ambition and complexity. Every detail carved into its limestone is a reminder. Great periods of history often begin quietly with stone, with ritual, with the determination to rebuild. And in that quiet, the story of a kingdom begins again. The timber circle of Holme, Seahenge, on the windy coast of Norfolk, England. The tide hides and reveals something that feels older than memory itself, a circle of ancient timbers rising from wet sand and salt water. Locals call it Seahenge, though archaeologists know it as the Holme Timber Circle. It is not a henge in the traditional sense. There are no stones, no towering megaliths. Instead, what stands here is a ring of 55 split oak posts, each placed upright more than 4,000 years ago, surrounding a single inverted tree stump at the center. It looks simple at first, but the more one examines it, the more its purpose slips from certainty into quiet mystery. The circle was discovered in 1998 when shifting tides pulled back layers of sand, revealing darkened timbers that had spent millennia preserved in peat. The sea had buried them, protected them, and then thousands of years later, brought them back to daylight. For archaeologists, it was a rare moment. Few wooden structures survive from the Bronze Age, because wood decays quickly when exposed to air. But here on the salt marsh coast, the peat had sealed everything away like a time capsule. When the posts emerged, they looked almost freshly cut, the tool marks still visible along their edges. The central stump is perhaps the most striking element. It is the upturned root system of a massive oak tree, placed deliberately upside down so that its broad roots fan upwards, like fingers reaching toward the sky. This was not an accident of nature. It was a choice, symbolic, intentional, meaningful, but meaningful in a way that has been lost with time. The people who built Seahenge lived around 2049 BCE, at a time when Britain consisted of scattered farming communities connected by trade, ritual, and seasonal rhythms. They understood the land not as something separate from themselves, but as part of a larger living world. To take a tree, something that had grown for centuries, and to set it in the earth upside down, suggests a worldview in which life could be turned, transformed, or guided between realms. Many archaeologists believe the circle may have been used for rituals connected to death, renewal, or passage. Not funeral rites in the modern sense, but something older, helping a soul travel, or marking a transition between seasons, or honoring the spirit of a revered ancestor. The wooden posts once formed a tight barrier, their tops uneven, giving the impression of a protective wall. From inside the circle, one could see the sky, but from the outside, the interior was hidden. This separation, inside and outside, seen and unseen, suggests that what happened within the ring was meant only for a select few. The upturned stump at the center may have served as a platform not for sacrifice in the sensational sense, but perhaps for laying the body of someone important, allowing wind, sun, and time to transform them. Bronze Age belief often treated death as a journey, not an end, and exposure to the elements was considered a sacred act that returned the body to nature. The location itself adds another layer to the story. When the circle was built, the coastline was very different. What is now open sea was then marshland, dotted with reeds and shallow pools. The builders chose a spot that was quiet, isolated, and away from daily life, a place where land and water mingled. In many early cultures, boundary zones were sacred, not fully land, not fully water, but somewhere in between. This liminal setting may have been essential to whatever ceremony took place here. The timber circle did not stand alone. A second circle was discovered nearby, built at roughly the same time, suggesting this landscape may have been a ritual complex. The two circles were aligned differently, one facing the sunrise, the other possibly oriented toward specific stars or seasonal markers. This indicates planning, not random construction, but a relationship with time itself. Despite the calm setting today, the structure speaks of enormous effort. Oak trees used for the posts were giant, some more than 2 centuries old. Cutting them with Bronze Age tools would have taken days of coordinated labor. Transporting them across marshland would have required teamwork and intention. The central stump alone, heavy with soil and roots, must have involved dozens of people. This investment shows that Seahenge was not a temporary ritual spot. It held significance powerful enough to justify a full communal undertaking. When the remains were excavated, archaeologists found that each post had been carefully sharpened and placed with the split side facing inward. This detail is small, but meaningful. It means the builders cared about how the circle looked to those inside it, suggesting again that the ritual space was designed for a chosen group. The posts also varied in height, creating a dynamic interior of shadows and gaps. At certain times of day, sunlight would have entered through the spaces, illuminating the stump differently, depending on season and weather. This interplay of light and wood may have been part of the ritual experience. After excavation, the timbers were preserved and studied. Dendrochronology, the science of tree ring dating, revealed the exact year the trees were felled, 2049 BCE, a level of precision rare for prehistoric monuments. Knowing this date allows archaeologists to situate Seahenge within the broader timeline of British prehistory, near the end of the era that produced Stonehenge, but with a distinctly different architectural approach. Where Stonehenge expressed permanence through stone, Seahenge expressed impermanence through wood, a structure meant to interact with weather, water, and time. For modern visitors, the circle inspires a different kind of reflection. It reminds us that not all ancient monuments were built for eternity. Some were built for a moment, a season, a ceremony, a generation, and then left to return to the earth. The people who made Seahenge did not need it to last forever. They needed it to serve a purpose in their own time. Reconstructed sections of the circle now stand in a museum, while the original site remains under shifting tides. On certain days, the sea still exposes small patches of the prehistoric peat bed, a reminder that the past is always closer than it seems. The Bronze Age communities who lived here left no written records, no detailed instructions, no myths carved in stone. But in this circle of wood, in its shape, its setting, its labor, they left something better, a glimpse into how they understood life, death, and the fragile space between. The timber circle of home speaks quietly, but it speaks clearly. It shows that the most ancient structures are not always the largest ones. Sometimes, a ring of oak posts standing against the sea can tell us more about human belief than any monument of stone. It asks a question that still resonates. How did our ancestors see the world, and what did they hope to become when they stepped into a circle where the sky met the earth? The Osirian stone pillars, hidden behind the more famous temples of Abydos, lies a structure unlike anything else in ancient Egypt. Partly sunken, partly carved into the earth. It feels older than its surroundings, as if it belongs to an age before pharaohs, before dynasties, before the landscape itself had settled into the desert we know today. This is the Osirion, a deep stone chamber supported by massive granite pillars, aligned with a water basin and sheltered beneath layers of ground. To reach it, one walks down a long, sloping passage. The temperature drops, the air shifts, and the world above begins to fade. What appears at the bottom is quiet and astonishing. A hall built from blocks so large they seem impossible to move, arranged with the same precision reserved for the most sacred spaces. The Osirion is not a grand temple filled with decoration. It is simple, austere, almost mathematical in design. 2 rows of enormous red granite pillars stand in silence, surrounded by water channels carved into the floor. Archaeologists believe it was constructed during the reign of Seti I, around 1290 BCE. But the architecture does not resemble the temples of his time. Instead, it echoes the style of the earliest stone complexes, heavy, unembellished, and monumental. The blocks used here are among the largest ever placed in Egypt, some weighing over 60 tons. Their surfaces are smooth, their edges straight. They were set with a confidence that suggests deep experience with stone engineering. Seti built his beautifully detailed temple nearby, covered in reliefs, color, and inscriptions. By contrast, the Osirion feels as if it was meant for something else, something quieter. The design is centered not on walls or ceilings, but on the experience of descent, of moving from light to darkness, from the world of the living into a symbolic underworld. The structure's name links it to Osiris, the god of death and rebirth. Ancient writings suggest the chamber represented the primordial mound, the first land to rise from the waters of creation. The water that once filled the surrounding channels would have reflected the pillars, doubling their height in the dim light. Priests entering this space would have seen the stone rising above still water, like the beginning of the world emerging from darkness. Though the walls are largely plain, the architecture carries its own meaning. Each block, each pillar, each alignment expresses a sense of permanence. There is no attempt to impress through imagery. The power lies in the stone itself. It is the kind of engineering that speaks without words, a form of communication through weight, silence, and endurance. Later, additions and inscriptions appear on the upper sections, showing that generations after Seti, the Osirion was still revered. But the core of the structure, the massive granite skeleton, remained unchanged. Over time, sand drifted in, floods filled the hall, and the ground above shifted. The chamber became buried for centuries, preserved by its own depth. When archaeologists rediscovered it in the early 20th century, they found water still pooled around the base of the pillars. The structure looked more like a natural cavern than a man-made temple. The blocks had not moved, the precision had not faded. Even after thousands of years, the Osirion remained steady, a testament to the exact engineering of its builders. Some scholars argue the chamber was intended as a symbolic tomb for Seti I, though no burial was ever found there. Others believe it served as part of a larger ritual complex tied to the Osiris Mysteries ceremonies that reenacted death and renewal. The depth of the chamber, the water, the quiet architecture all support this idea. Everything leads downward, inward, toward a center shaped by stone and reflection. What makes the Osirion particularly striking is how different it feels from the world above it. While Egypt's temples are often open, bright, and filled with inscriptions, this space is introspective. It is a structure built for movement in darkness, for sound to echo slowly between stone surfaces, for water to form a boundary between the ordinary and the sacred. Standing inside, one becomes aware of stillness, the kind of silence that amplifies small sounds, like a single drip of water or the soft shift of air. The granite pillars themselves reveal the care that went into their creation. They were quarried in Aswan, far to the south, transported along the Nile, and fitted into the chamber with almost perfect alignment. Their placement suggests planning on a grand scale not only in construction but in purpose. Each pillar stands at a point where weight is distributed evenly across the hall, forming a stable grid that supports the chamber's geometry. Because of the water table beneath Abydos, the chamber floods easily. This has led some researchers to suggest the water was not a flaw but an intended feature. Ancient artists often depicted the underworld as a place of still pools, rivers, and hidden chambers. The Osirion mirrors these images closely, almost as if the builders were creating a physical version of myth, a place where rituals of passage and transformation could be enacted. Even after excavation, the lower floor continues to hold water for much of the year. As a result, the Osirion often appears half-submerged, the pillars rising from reflective pools, just as they might have in antiquity. The effect is both simple and powerful, stone and water creating a union of permanence and fluidity. In the greater story of Egypt, the Osirion sits at a crossroads. It belongs to the New Kingdom through its inscriptions, yet its architecture recalls the grand, minimal structures of the Old Kingdom. It is both familiar and unusual, both Egyptian and somehow older in feeling than anything around it. The combination of style, purpose, and engineering has made it one of the most intriguing sights in Abydos. The Osirion does not overwhelm with beauty or scale. Instead, it invites contemplation. It is a structure meant to be experienced slowly through descent, through shadow, through reflection. The first impression is weight, the second is silence, the third is something more subtle, the realization that the people who built this chamber understood both the physical and symbolic power of stone. Whatever specific rituals occurred here, the architecture itself tells us the intention was profound. This was not a place for the crowds of festivals or the bustling activity of temple life. It was a place for priests, for initiation, for ceremonial descent into the unseen, a place where darkness, water, and stone came together to represent the mysteries of existence. The Osirian stone pillars remain a reminder of how the ancient Egyptians understood sacred space. They did not need decoration to convey meaning. Geometry, mass, and depth were enough. The chamber still stands as a testament to this idea, a quiet, enduring monument beneath the desert, shaped equally by engineering and belief. The Sarmatian gold helmet, across the open plains of Central Asia where the horizon seems to stretch without end, and the wind moves through grass like a quiet tide, archaeologists uncovered a piece of craftsmanship that feels almost impossible for its age. It was found in a burial mound belonging to the Sarmatians, a nomadic people who roamed the steppes more than 2,000 years ago, and at its center lay something unmistakably powerful, a gold helmet, shaped not only for war, but for identity, status, and belief. The Sarmatians were horse riders, warriors, and travelers who lived in a world defined by movement. Their lives were carried across the steppe, their settlements shifting with the seasons, their wealth stored in weapons, horses, and small but precious objects. But the helmet discovered in Kazakhstan was not small. It was a full, gleaming headpiece, a mixture of armor, mask, and monument. It covered the face, cheeks, and crown in gold sheets carefully, hammered into shape. The eyes were outlined, the cheeks molded, the forehead embossed with symbols. Even in burial, the helmet seemed built not for battle, but for presence. Excavations at Sarmatian kurgans, the great earth mounds that rise from the steppe, often reveal weapons, ornaments, and horse gear. But this helmet stood out immediately. It was far more elaborate than anything ordinary warriors would carry. The gold surface, though now dulled by time, still holds the marks of the craftsman, tiny hammer impressions, fine chased lines, delicate borders, shaped with discipline. These details show that Sarmatian metalworkers were not simply making armor. They were shaping identity, myth, and lineage into metal. The Sarmatians lived between worlds, between the Greek cities to their west, the Achaemenid and later Parthian realms to their south, and the nomadic tribes of Siberia to their north. Their culture absorbed influences from all directions, weaving them into a style recognizable as their own. The helmet reflects this. The facial mask resembles those of ancient Iran, where elite warriors wore metal visors designed to intimidate. Yet the animal motifs, flowing lines, and steppe-inspired curves show the hand of local Sarmatian artisans. Whoever was buried with this helmet lived a life at the highest level of their society. The burial mound contained more than weapons. There were gold plaques shaped like animals, beads of imported glass, and remnants of textiles that once wrapped the body. The arrangement suggests a person of rank, perhaps a chieftain, a noble warrior, or someone entrusted with the rituals of warfare and leadership. The helmet, placed carefully above the remains, was not simply an object of defense. It was a signal, a message left for the living and the dead. Gold was not commonly worn into battle. It is too soft, too valuable, too symbolic. More likely, this helmet served ceremonial purposes, worn in processions, displayed during important gatherings, or placed on the head of the deceased to signify their status in the afterlife. In a culture that believed in movement across worlds, the living world, the spirit world, the world of ancestors, such an object was a bridge. The helmet may have marked its wearer as someone who carried authority, not by force alone, but by tradition. The craftsmanship tells its own story. The gold sheets were shaped by repoussé, hammered from the inside until the form rose outward. The edges were reinforced by folding and crimping, making them stronger. The eye openings were cut with careful precision. In some places, patterns resembling rays or feathers extend outward across the brow. These were not only decoration, they may have represented divine protection or ancestral power. Near the helmet, archaeologists found horse bones arranged deliberately, a common feature of steppe burials. The Sarmatians believed that the bond between warrior and horse continued after death. The horse was not only transport, it was identity. Many steppe peoples saw their horses as companions in both life and afterlife, guiding the soul into new territory. The presence of horse remains beside such an extraordinary helmet reinforces the idea that this grave belonged to someone with deep ritual significance. The Sarmatians themselves remain partly mysterious. They left no written records. Their history is pieced together from archaeology, Greek accounts, and the stories of the tribes they encountered. Yet the objects they left behind speak with clarity. Their weapons show mastery of iron, Their jewelry reveals an eye for detail and meaning. Their burial mounds mark landscapes with quiet permanence. And this helmet, heavy, bright, silent, stands at the center of that world. What is striking about the helmet is how human it feels. The artisans sculpted the facial features with subtlety, the curve of the cheek, the bend of the brow, the slight hollow beneath the eyes. It is as if the helmet was meant not to hide the identity of the wearer, but to elevate it, to place them within a lineage that extended beyond a single life. The metal, shaped into a face, becomes both mask and mirror. Today, when the helmet is displayed in museum light, the gold catches reflections in a way that feels almost ceremonial. It is easy to imagine it shining under the sun of the steppe, or glowing by firelight during a night ritual. Even in silence, it suggests atmosphere, a world of wide plains, distant horizons, and the rhythm of hooves across earth. The Sarmatian gold helmet is not famous outside academic circles, yet it deserves recognition as one of the most striking artifacts from Eurasia's ancient steppe cultures. It captures a moment when gold was not used for display alone, but for identity, memory, and ceremony. It represents a people whose world was defined not by cities or monuments, but by movement, tradition, and skill. And though the Sarmatians vanished from history long ago, their craftsmanship endures, telling us that even in the vast openness of the steppe, people created forms meant to last, meant to anchor memory, meant to be seen by generations who would never know their name. The helmet remains as they left it, calm, deliberate, dignified, a reminder that power, in the ancient world, was not only carried in weapons, but in the quiet weight of symbols carved into gold. The Insia carved puma stone, high in the Andean highlands, where cold winds sweep across terraced slopes and ancient walls cling to the hillsides, lies one of the more unusual pieces of Inca stonework, a massive carved rock shaped into the form of a puma. It sits quietly among the ruins near Cusco, often overlooked by visitors searching for larger monuments. But to archaeologists, this carved puma stone represents something rare, an attempt to transform the landscape itself into a living symbol, using a single boulder as both sculpture and sacred architecture. Cusco was the heart of the Inca world, a city planned with intention, shaped by belief, and aligned with mountains seen as living ancestors. The Incas saw their capital not just as a settlement, but as a reflection of the cosmos. To them, the puma was not just an animal, it was a protector, a symbol of earthly power, courage, and balance. And according to chroniclers, the Incas believed Cusco itself was shaped like a puma, its head at the fortress of Sacsayhuaman, its body extending into the old city, and its tail near the Temple of the Sunday. Within this sacred geography, carved stones like the puma rock were not decorative. They were points of energy, crafted into forms that tied the human world to the mountains, rivers, and sky. The puma stone lies near the ceremonial zones around Kenko and Sacsayhuaman areas, filled with rock altars, carved channels, and platforms used for rituals connected to ancestors and the land. Set into the natural landscape, the stone has been shaped by hand. The back slopes down like a spine, the head is carefully defined, and the outlines of the paws and body are carved directly from the bedrock. Even in its weathering, the form remains clear, an animal emerging from the earth. The stone itself was not moved here. The Incas preferred to work with natural formations, carving directly into bedrock so that the sculpture remained part of the mountain. This approach reflects an idea central to Andean belief: Huacas, sacred places where the physical and spiritual worlds met. A huaca could be a spring, a hill, a boulder, or a stone shaped by human hands. What mattered was not its size, but its presence and location within the landscape. The puma stone likely served such a role. Archaeologists believe it was part of a ritual space connected to the cycles of the sun and the movements of water. Nearby channels carved into stone were used to pour liquids, chicha, water, or offerings that flowed down these surfaces in ceremonies tied to fertility and renewal. The puma, as a symbol of strength and protection, may have represented earthly power within that ritual landscape, one of the three realms of Andean cosmology: Hanan Pacha, the upper world; Ke Pacha, the world of the living, the puma's realm; Uku Pacha, the underworld. Seen this way, the carved stone was not a sculpture in isolation. It was a marker of balance between, quote, worlds. The precision of the carving is another reason the stone draws interest. Inca stonework is famous for its tight-fitting blocks and polished surfaces. but the carved puma shows a different style. Smooth organic forms, rounded edges, and flowing lines that follow the natural shape of the bedrock. Rather than reshaping the stone, the craftsmen understood its limits, allowing the boulder to guide the figure they revealed. This approach reflects the Inca philosophy: work with nature, not against it. They carved only what the stone allowed, shaping spirit from material without forcing it. The stone's location strengthens the sense of intentionality. The site offers a wide view across the valley, with sightlines toward Cusco and toward the sacred mountain peaks that framed the city. In Inca architecture, these alignments were never accidental. Every major structure, temples, plazas, even walls, pointed toward specific mountains considered ancestors or protectors. The puma carving fits naturally within this network of sacred orientation, suggesting that it was part of a larger ceremonial route that connected Sacsayhuaman, Chenco, and other ritual complexes around Cusco. Today, the stone's surface is worn, the details softened by centuries of weather, but the shape still holds. Visitors describe a feeling of calm when standing beside it, as if the stone carries a quiet memory of the ceremonial world it once belonged to. The Andean air is thin and clear, the wind whispering through the grass around it, and the stone sits grounded, unchanged, exactly as the Incas carved it. There is no plaque explaining its use, no surviving text describing the rituals performed here, but the stone itself speaks not in words, but in presence. Archaeologists studying the Puma stone often compare it with other carved boulders around Cusco: the serpent carvings at Kenco, the throne-like seats cut into bedrock at Sacsayhuaman, and the mysterious carved channels that run like veins across nearby stones. Together, they form a network of sacred spaces, each one small, but collectively powerful. The Incas did not isolate their monumental architecture into a single temple. They wove their ceremonial world into the hills, the rocks, the natural contours of the land. The Puma stone is one thread in that larger fabric, a reminder that the Incas saw meaning everywhere, not only in what they built, but in what already existed. The stone also reflects something deeper about Inca engineering: their ability to integrate the natural world into systems of ritual, society, and environment. They understood how to terrace mountains for agriculture, how to channel water through stone to feed both crops and ceremonies, and how to create spiritual landscapes where geology and belief could merge. In this context, carving a puma into a boulder was an act of connection, drawing strength from the earth itself. As the sun shifts across the day, the carved shape changes. Morning light reveals the contours of the head. Afternoon shadows highlight the back and body. This interaction with sunlight may not be accidental. The Incas used light and shadow as part of their observations, especially during solstices and equinoxes. It is possible, though unproven, that the Puma stone played a role in seasonal ceremonies marking the movements of the sun across the highland sky. What remains certain is that the stone embodies the Inca ability to blend symbolism, landscape, and craft into one form. It is not monumental like the Great Walls of Sacsayhuaman, nor as finely worked as the masonry of Machu Picchu, but it holds a deep, quiet weight, the kind of artifact that reveals the inner world of a civilization through its simplicity. The Inca-carved Puma stone stands today as a reminder of a culture that saw the world not as separate parts, but as a unified whole, a world where mountains were ancestors, animals were symbols of cosmic realms, and the landscape itself was a living temple. In its smooth curves and grounded presence, the stone carries forward a tradition of seeing sacred meaning in the earth, a tradition that endures in the Andean highlands to this day. The Wari D-shaped temple monolith high in the central highlands of Peru, where the landscape rises into dry plateaus and scattered valleys, the remains of the Wari civilization lie partly exposed, partly hidden beneath centuries of soil and stone. Before the Incas, before their imperial roads and mountain citadels, the Wari shaped this region with planned cities, administrative centers, and ceremonial structures, unlike anything that came after. Among these remains stands a mysterious carved monolith found near one of the Wari's most distinctive structures, the D-shaped temple. To visitors, the monolith looks simple at first glance: a tall, heavy stone pillar rising from an area once used for ritual gatherings. But to archaeologists, it represents the quiet complexity of a civilization still only partly understood. The Wari left no surviving written records, no preserved chronicles explaining their beliefs. What remains are their stones, their ceramics, their planned settlements, and the monoliths they placed at key ceremonial points. The D-shaped temple is one of the clearest signs of Wari religious architecture. Built with careful planning, its curved outer wall creates a shape rarely used by other Andean cultures. Inside, the structure contains small chambers, niches, and platforms where offerings were made. Many of these temples include areas clearly set apart for ritual specialists, suggesting that ceremonies were controlled and deliberate, carried out by trained priests. It is near one of these temples that the monolith stands, a single, upright stone, carved with surfaces that are mostly plain but intentionally shaped. It is tall enough to catch the eye, yet not so large that it appears monumental. Its purpose, however, remains a subject of quiet debate. Some researchers believe the monolith marked the ritual axis of the temple. Its placement suggests alignment with the curved wall, possibly representing a point through which the ceremonial space connected to the wider landscape. Others argue that it may have supported a wooden or textile structure, serving as the main post for banners or sacred cloth used during ceremonies. But another possibility is more symbolic. The Wari used stone pillars in several sites, often positioning them near ceremonial plazas. These pillars may have represented ancestors, deities, or the spirits that governed natural forces. In the high Andes, stone was more than a building material, it was a medium through which the sacred world could be expressed. The monolith may have embodied a presence important to the people who gathered around the D-shaped temple. What makes the Wari monolith particularly intriguing is the absence of heavy decoration. Unlike later cultures that carved elaborate imagery into their sacred stones, the Wari kept many surfaces smooth and unmarked. This simplicity has led some archaeologists to suggest that the meaning of the stone was not in its carvings, but in its placement, orientation, and the ceremonies performed around it. The monolith was shaped from local stone, likely transported a short distance from a nearby quarry. Wari craftsmen understood how to achieve stability in large stones. The base of the monolith is tapered to fit securely into the ground, giving it balance even after centuries of erosion. Though weathered, the stone still stands upright, a quiet testament to the engineering and intention that placed it there. Around the monolith, the remains of the D-shaped temple reveal the structured world of the Wari. The walls were built from carefully fitted masonry, with stones laid in patterns that controlled both light and movement within the space. Narrow corridors would have guided worshippers, leading them toward inner chambers where offerings were made. The shape of the temple itself, curved, rather than angular, may have held astronomical or symbolic meaning. Some researchers propose that the curve of the D-shape corresponded with solar paths or mountain alignments, framing certain peaks during specific times of the year. Others think the shape might have represented an abstract form of a deity, a womb-like enclosure, or a ceremonial boundary marking a transition between the everyday world and the sacred environment inside. The monolith's position strengthens this sense of deliberation. It stands along the primary access route to the temple's inner zone, almost as if it was meant to accompany the ceremonial path. When people approached the temple, the stone would have been one of the first objects they encountered, a silent witness to gatherings, prayers, or offerings. Weathering on the stone suggests that liquids may have been poured over its surface. Traces of mineral buildup and smooth channels imply repeated contact with water or chicha, the fermented drink used in Andean rituals. If this interpretation is correct, the monolith may have played a role in libation ceremonies, where offerings were poured downward to symbolically nourish the earth or honor unseen spirits. The Wari civilization flourished between AD 600 and 1000, long before the rise of the Inca Empire. They built expansive road networks, developed terrace farming, and organized cities with a level of planning rarely seen in the ancient Andes. Yet much about their religion remains unknown. The monolith near the D-shaped temple is one of the few clues to how the Wari understood the world around them. Unlike the Incas, who integrated their sacred architecture with surrounding mountains, the Wari placed greater emphasis on enclosed ceremonial spaces. Their temples were inward-focused, controlled, and structured. The monolith, standing just outside or along the threshold of the temple space, may have marked the division between the outside world and the controlled ritual interior. Today, the monolith stands quietly in an open landscape. The walls of the D-shaped temple are partly collapsed, and the surrounding structures lie in scattered fragments. The highland wind carries dust across the plateau, and the air is dry and thin, but the stone remains solid, untouched in its placement. exactly where Wari hands set it more than 1,000 years ago. Visitors often describe a strange sense of stillness around the area, not dramatic or unsettling, but calm, as though the place still holds the memory of ceremonies once practiced there. The monolith, though simple, commands attention. Its presence feels deliberate, its silence meaningful. Archaeologists continue to study Wari sites across Peru, comparing monoliths, temple structures, and settlement layouts. Each discovery reveals a little more about how the Wari saw their world. But the full story remains incomplete, shaped only by stones and fragments. The D-shaped temple monolith stands as a reminder of that mystery, a single piece of a belief system no longer fully known. It reflects a civilization sophisticated, enough to plan entire urban centers, yet subtle in the symbols they left behind. In its plain surfaces and quiet position, the monolith invites careful observation rather than quick interpretation. It embodies the restrained power of Wari ritual life, controlled, intentional, and deeply connected to the landscape. A solitary stone carrying the memory of ceremonies, beliefs, and a culture that shaped the Andes long before the rise of the Inca Empire. The Lion Throne of Nimrud. In the northern plains of Iraq, where dry winds sweep over ancient earth and low mounds hide the remains of forgotten cities, the ruins of Nimrud rise quietly above the landscape. Once a major center of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, the city was filled with palaces, carved reliefs, towering gateways, and objects that spoke to a world ruled by kings who saw themselves as guardians of order. Among the remnants found within these ruins stands one of the more unusual and evocative artifacts: a carved stone throne, decorated with lions and rosette motifs, a seat that once belonged to the ceremonial spaces of a powerful court. The stone throne is not large in the way one might imagine royal furniture. Instead, it is compact, solid, shaped from a single block of limestone, with carved legs and side panels that reflect the symbolism of Assyrian authority. The lions form the base and support, their bodies stylized but strong, their faces calm rather than aggressive. Above them, rosettes, a motif commonly used in Assyrian art, appear carved with a precision that has survived centuries of burial. To archaeologists, this throne represents a rare piece of courtly furniture preserved in stone rather than wood or bronze. Most Assyrian palaces used wooden chairs inlaid with ivory or decorated with gold leaf. Stone, in contrast, was reserved for objects meant to endure: ceremonial thrones, altars, or items made for shrines within the palace complex. The lion throne appears to belong to that category, an object meant not for comfort, but for symbolism. The lion, across the Near East, represented strength, divine protection, and royal legitimacy. Assyrian kings often depicted themselves hunting lions, not to show cruelty but to demonstrate their role as protectors who could defeat the forces of chaos. When lions appear on thrones, they are not enemies, but allies, guardians built into the very seat of rulership. The rosettes carved above them represent life, continuity, and divine favor. Together, the motifs form a message: stability, protection, and authority granted through the gods. The throne was discovered within the ruins of a palace area at Nimrud. Its precise original location is uncertain, but records suggest it stood within a smaller ceremonial chamber or shrine room inside the palace complex. These were spaces where rituals, blessings, or administrative consultations took place, not public gatherings, but controlled environments where only select individuals could enter. What makes the lion throne so intriguing is how quiet it appears. Unlike the grand wall reliefs showing battles, chariots, and winged guardian spirits, the throne is plain in comparison. Its surface is smooth, its decoration limited, its proportions unembellished. This simplicity has led researchers to believe it may have been the seat of a priestly figure or a symbolic resting place for a deity's presence, rather than a king's daily throne. In Assyrian palaces, certain rooms held statues of gods brought out during rituals. These statues were treated not as symbols, but as living presences. They received offerings, were washed, anointed, and placed on seats or platforms. The lion throne may have been one such seat, a place meant not for a human ruler, but for a divine image. Another possibility is that the throne was used during enthronement ceremonies or special rituals marking transitions of power. Assyrian kings relied heavily on rituals that connected them to divine authority. A throne carved with lions, the sacred guardians of kingship, would have reinforced that connection in every ceremony held within palace walls. The craftsmanship of the throne reflects the larger artistic traditions of Nimrud. During its height in the 9th and 8th centuries BCE, the city became a major center of innovation. Stone carvers experimented with detailed reliefs, finely shaped ivory workers produced decorative plaques, and architects designed hallways that guided light toward key ceremonial areas. The throne fits naturally within this environment, a blend of practical form and symbolic meaning. Even after its discovery, the throne retained a sense of stillness. Unlike movable luxury objects, the stone seat remained in place for centuries, protected beneath the layers of a ruined palace. When archaeologists uncovered it, the throne's carved lions were intact, their eyes still visible, their bodies still carrying the weight of the upper structure. The rosettes had weathered but not vanished. Standing before the throne today, researchers describe a sense of presence not dramatic or unsettling, but calm, as though the space remembers the purpose it once served. The throne's simplicity invites careful observation. It forces the viewer to imagine the rituals, voices, and footsteps that once filled the chamber around it. Nimrud itself carries a layered history. It was a capital, then, an administrative center, then a ceremonial city before its eventual decline. Much of its grandeur is known only through fragments: sculpted slabs, broken ivory pieces, foundations of once towering buildings. The lion throne is one of the few objects that remains whole, offering a quiet window into the structure of Assyrian ceremonial life. Archaeologists continue to study its motifs, proportions, and context. They compare it with chairs and thrones shown in palace reliefs, seeking clues to how it was used. The lions on the throne resemble those carved along palace entrances, suggesting a protective function. The rosettes appear in textile patterns, in jewelry, and in architectural decoration, a symbol of continuity across the empire. In many ways, the throne embodies the Assyrian worldview, that power was not only political, but cosmic. A king ruled under divine mandate, supported by guardian spirits, and watched by the gods. Every object in palace ritual spaces reinforced that relationship. The throne, with its lion supports and rosette carvings, was part of that system, a silent participant in the ceremonies that sustained the empire. Today, the lion throne of Nimrud serves as a reminder of a world where authority was shaped not only by armies and conquests, but by rituals carried out in quiet rooms behind heavy stone walls. Its presence endures even as much of Nimrud lies ruined, damaged, or lost. It is a carved seat, but also a symbol, one that carries the memory of the ancient court, the structure of belief, and the calm confidence of a civilization that once ruled the Mesopotamian plains. The giant wooden canoe of Must Farm, in the wetlands of eastern England, where the landscape once shifted between reed beds, shallow channels, and waterlogged ground, an extraordinary discovery emerged from the mud at a place called Must Farm. What appeared first as fragments of ancient timber slowly revealed itself to be a remarkably preserved boat, a 9-meter Bronze Age canoe carved from a single tree. It had rested there for nearly 3,000 years, sealed in wet sediment, protected by the very environment that once carried it. Today, the canoe stands as one of the clearest windows into life along prehistoric waterways. It speaks quietly of a world shaped not by roads or fields, but by rivers that served as roots, borders, and lifelines for the communities that lived along their banks. The boat was found during excavations of a small settlement that had been built on wooden stilts above the water. This settlement, preserved by a sudden fire and collapse, became known as Britain's Pompeii of the Bronze Age. Nearby, half buried in mud and silt, lay the giant canoe, a reminder that these people were not isolated villagers, but active travelers who navigated the wetlands with skill and purpose. The canoe was carved from a single oak trunk. Craftsmen had hollowed it with remarkable precision, using bronze tools to remove the inner wood while maintaining the strength of the sides. The hull is long and narrow, its interior smoothed by repeated shaping, the ends subtly shaped to sit well in the water. The boat's size is notable: 9 meters long, large enough to carry multiple people, cargo, or materials. What makes the canoe especially important is its state of preservation. Waterlogged sediment prevented the wood from decaying, allowing archaeologists to see details rarely preserved in ancient wooden objects: tool marks, repairs, and even the way water once flowed through its shape. These details help researchers understand not only how the boat was built, but how it was used. Near the edges of the canoe, lines of small holes suggest the presence of a sewn-on gunwale, a raised wooden rim stitched in place using organic fibers. This addition would have strengthened the upper edges, preventing cracks during paddling or loading. It also suggests the boat carried weight or traveled enough distance to require reinforcement. Inside, evidence of clay patches shows how the Bronze Age builders sealed any gaps to make the vessel watertight. These patches were renewed over time, meaning the canoe was not a ceremonial object or short-lived experiment, but a practical tool used repeatedly in daily life. The wetlands around Must Farm were a complex environment during the Late Bronze Age. Rivers and channels connected communities, allowing them to trade goods such as pottery, textiles, and food. The canoe may have transported tools or grain, or carried people between seasonal settlements. It may also have been used for fishing, gathering reeds, or moving livestock. Its size suggests versatility, large enough for group travel, yet narrow enough to navigate through shallow water and narrow channels. The placement of the canoe offers its own quiet mystery. It was found lying sideways, partly submerged, as though it had been abandoned or left tied near the settlement when the stilt houses burned. Some archaeologists believe it may have sunk accidentally, weighed down during a storm, or trapped when water levels shifted. Others propose it was intentionally left or discarded when newer boats replaced it. Whatever the reason, the canoe's final moments are silent in the archaeological record. There is no clear sign of struggle or breakage. It simply rested in the mud and remained there for millennia, preserved by layers of silt and peat. The craftsmanship of the canoe reveals a community deeply comfortable with its environment. Cutting a 9-meter hull from a single oak required not only skill but knowledge of the landscape, where to find suitable trees, how to shape them, and how to maintain them over years of use. Bronze axes and adzes left marks still visible on the inner surface, showing the strokes used by ancient hands. This canoe is one of several found in the area, but its preservation surpasses most examples. It shows the curvature of the hull almost exactly as it would have appeared when in use. For researchers, this is invaluable. It allows them to model how the boat behaved in water, how stable it was, and what loads it could carry. The canoe also reflects the broader connections of Bronze Age Britain. During this time, people were linked through networks of trade that extended far across the island and even beyond. Metalwork, pottery styles, and domestic artifacts show shared designs across regions. Boats such as the Must Farm canoe would have been essential to maintaining these connections. They transformed rivers into roads and wetlands into active corridors of movement. Standing beside the canoe today, the sense of scale becomes clear. It is long, balanced, and practical, not elaborate or decorative, but made for a life centered on water. Its surface is darkened from centuries in the mud, and the wood carries the quiet texture of age. Yet the shape remains unmistakable, a working vessel designed by people who understood their environment fully. Archaeologists carefully lifted the canoe from its waterlogged resting place using specialized supports. The process took time, as the wood needed constant moisture to prevent cracking. Once removed, it was placed in conservation, where it underwent a lengthy treatment to stabilize the ancient timber. Even now, it requires careful control of temperature and humidity. The canoe offers more than technical information. It provides a glimpse into the daily life of a world that left few written records. The Bronze Age people of Must Farm lived close to the water. Their homes were built above it, their tools adapted to it, and their movements shaped by it. The canoe was not an accessory, it was part of the rhythm of survival. The excavation site itself has become a key reference for understanding Britain's prehistoric wetlands. The preserved houses, pottery, textiles, and wooden structures all point to a society that combined practicality with careful craftsmanship. The canoe fits naturally within this world. Functional, well-made, and used often enough to be repaired repeatedly. Today, the giant wooden canoe of Must Farm stands as one of the most complete Bronze Age boats ever found in Britain. It is a reminder of a time when water shaped everything: movement, economy, and daily life. It carries a quiet sense of continuity, connecting modern observers to people who once navigated these same channels with skill and familiarity. A long wooden vessel, carved from a single tree, preserved by accident, and revealed only when the mud finally gave way. The Hathor Cow Shrine. In the desert cliffs west of Thebes, where the stone rises in pale terraces above the Nile Valley, A remarkable shrine once stood, a gilded structure depicting a sacred cow emerging from a mountain. This image, both gentle and powerful, belonged to the goddess Hathor, one of the most ancient and beloved figures in Egyptian belief. The shrine, found within the mortuary temple complex of Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahari, represents a rare union of art, myth, and ritual architecture. The Hathor cow shrine was not merely a decorative object. It formed part of a larger ceremonial landscape built into the cliffs, where the pharaoh's temple met the sacred desert that symbolized the realm of the gods. In this setting, the image of Hathor, a protective mother, a goddess of music, joy, and the afterlife, emerged from the rock as if crossing between worlds. The shrine captured that moment in solid form. Crafted of wood but covered in gold leaf, the shrine's surfaces reflected sunlight that reached into the temple's interior spaces. The cow, carved in rounded form, steps forward from the mountain backdrop. Her eyes are inlaid, her body smooth, her horns protective, as she shelters a small figure beneath her, often interpreted as the king, receiving nourishment and legitimacy from the goddess. To the Egyptians, this image spoke of rebirth, blessing, and royal protection. The form of the shrine mirrors an essential Egyptian idea, that the desert cliffs were not barren landscape, but the physical body of the goddess herself. Hathor was often called the Mistress of the West, the guardian who welcomed the deceased into the afterlife. Here, in the temple of Hatshepsut, that concept materialized through sculpture. The cow emerging from the mountain symbolized Hathor rising from the western cliffs to embrace the king. Archaeologists studying the shrine have noted the precision of its craftsmanship. The cow's posture, stepping gently, head lowered slightly, suggests movement rather than rigidity. The shrine's back panel is carved to resemble the natural shape of the cliffs, turning the wooden structure into a symbolic extension of the surrounding geology. Every contour was shaped with intention, linking the object to the place where it stood. The shrine was housed in one of the temple's Hathor chapels, a space adorned with columns shaped like the goddess's face. These chapels were gathering points for processions and rituals dedicated to music, offerings, and renewal. Priests played sistrums, the sacred rattles associated with Hathor, their sound believed to calm and attract the goddess. Within this environment, the cow shrine served as the focus of devotion. The Hathor cow shrine also reflects the aspirations of Hatshepsut, Egypt's female pharaoh. Her temple, built against the cliff face in terraces and colonnades, was designed not only as a mortuary complex, but as a statement of divine endorsement. Aligning herself with Hathor, a goddess who embodied motherhood and kingship, reinforced Hatshepsut's legitimacy. The shrine's imagery, showing the goddess nursing or protecting the king, can be read as a symbolic affirmation of her rule. The shrine is also part of a larger Egyptian tradition. Hathor appears in tombs, temples, and desert sanctuaries throughout the Theban region. Her image as a cow emerging from the cliffs is repeated in reliefs and paintings, always tied to the western mountains, where the sun descended each day. For the Egyptians, the West represented both death and renewal, an entrance to the afterlife. Hathor's role as a guardian of that passage made her presence essential in funerary spaces. When archaeologists uncovered the shrine, they found it remarkably well preserved, though fragile. The gold leaf had survived in patches, and the wooden core required delicate restoration. Even in its worn state, the artistic choices remain clear. The cow's gaze is forward, calm, protective. The contours of the mountain panel shape a smooth arch around her. The scene is both intimate and monumental, a small shrine representing a vast cosmic relationship. The shrine's proportions also speak to its function. It was not designed to be moved easily. Its size and form suggest it remained in place during ceremonies, likely anchored within a recess or platform. Offerings of milk, incense, and flowers may have been placed before it. During festivals, processions moving through the temple would pause here to honor the goddess before continuing into deeper chambers. The Hathor cow shrine helps researchers understand the layered symbolism of Egyptian religion. Unlike many ancient cultures, the Egyptians integrated their landscape directly into their theology. A cliff was not only stone, it was a dwelling place of gods. A desert path was not just a route, it was a boundary between worlds. The shrine brings that worldview into physical form, capturing the moment the goddess emerges to welcome the living and the dead. Today, the surviving parts of the shrine are housed in museum collections, protected from further deterioration. But the space it once occupied in Hatshepsut's temple remains open, bathed in shifting sunlight, surrounded by columns bearing Hathor's likeness. Visitors walk through the area with a sense of quiet, the wind carrying sand across the stone floors as it once did thousands of years ago. Even without the original shrine in place, the architecture conveys its presence. The chapel feels intentional, layered with meaning, shaped around the image of the goddess stepping out from the cliffs behind it. The surrounding reliefs show Hathor embracing the king, offering him life and protection. The shrine was simply the central expression of those themes, a focal point around which the rituals revolved. In the broader history of ancient Egypt, the Hathor cow shrine stands as a reminder of how deeply the Egyptians connected art to belief. It is not grand in scale compared to pyramids or colossal statues, yet it carries a profound, symbolic weight. It shows a gentle deity, a protective presence, a link between land and divinity, a golden cow stepping out of stone, carrying the memory of rituals performed in quiet chambers overlooking the Nile. The colossal quartzite statue of Amenhotep III. In 2010, during routine excavation work in the ancient city of Thebes, a team of archaeologists uncovered something so large and unexpected that early visitors assumed it must be a modern replica, a misplaced museum cast, or a training prop left in the mud, but it was neither. Slowly rising from the earth was the shattered upper half of a colossal statue carved from quartzite, its surface coated in centuries of silt. When fully revealed, it measured more than 26 feet in height, a towering image of Amenhotep III, one of Egypt's most powerful pharaohs. The statue had been buried in the mud of Qam el-Hetan, the site of Amenhotep III's mortuary temple. Once the largest temple complex in Egypt, it had long since collapsed, leaving only fragments and the famous Colossi of Memnon standing above the landscape. Everything else had settled into the ground, leaving behind a field of broken stone and, as it turned out, the enormous statue waiting in silence. The upper body emerged first, a massive chest, broad shoulders, and a calm, idealized face. Even through layers of mud, the craftsmanship was unmistakable. The statue had been carved from a single block of red quartzite, a stone quarried far to the south near Aswan, and transported hundreds of miles to the temple. Quartzite is extremely hard, demanding experienced artisans and specialized tools. That the ancient sculptors shaped a figure of this scale from such material speaks to the capabilities of Amenhotep III's craftsmen. This discovery surprised even specialists. While the Colossi of Memnon stood as known markers of the temple's grandeur, the presence of another colossal statue nearly as large, and buried intact, suggested the original complex was far more populated with monumental images than previously understood. Some estimates now propose that dozens of statues once filled the courtyards and processional routes of the temple, creating one of the most impressive sculptural landscapes in ancient Egypt. The statue was found lying on its back, broken into large pieces, but still largely connected. Its position was unusual. It had not been toppled by looters or moved during ancient times. Instead, geological changes, earthquakes, shifting water tables, rising mud levels, had slowly consumed the temple over centuries. The colossal figure had simply settled into the earth, sealed beneath layers of silt that preserved portions of its surface. As archaeologists cleaned the statue, the face of Amenhotep III became clear. The features were typical of his time: full lips, almond-shaped eyes, and a serene expression reflecting divine kingship. The king wears the Nemes headdress, folded neatly behind the shoulders. Though the lower portion of the statue was missing, the upper half alone conveys the scale of the original monument. The excavation process was deliberate and slow. Quartzite, once cracked, can fracture further if moved too quickly. Teams used brushes, water sprays, and wooden supports to stabilize each surface. Once cleared, the statue revealed signs of ancient restoration evidence that even during Amenhotep III's time, the colossal image may have required reinforcement or modification. This suggests the statue was not only monumental in scale, but also actively maintained during the pharaoh's reign. Amenhotep III ruled during a period of immense prosperity. His reign marked a high point in Egyptian art, architecture, and international relations. He commissioned more statues of himself than nearly any other pharaoh, not out of vanity, but to reinforce his divine presence across the land. These statues filled temples, plazas, and ceremonial routes, creating a visual network of power. The colossal statue found in 2010 was one piece of that larger strategy. The style of the statue matches other sculptures from Amenhotep III's later years, when he emphasized his connection to the sun god and presented himself as a semi-divine being. The size and material further reinforce this theme. In Egyptian belief, scale represented status, and quartzite with its durability and reddish color symbolized eternal power. A 26-foot statue made of this material was not simply decorative. It was a declaration of cosmic authority. The location of the find also has meaning. Kom El Hettan was built deliberately close to the Theban cliffs, aligning with solar paths and Nile cycles. The mortuary temple served as a place where rituals reinforced the king's presence among the living even after death. Colossal statues like this one guarded entrances, framed processional walkways, or stood before massive gateways. Each piece played a role in guiding movement and shaping the experience of those entering the temple. Standing beside the excavated statue today, even in fragments, gives a sense of its original impact. The head alone is taller than a human. The shoulders are broad enough to span several meters. When reassembled digitally, the statue towers above its surroundings, matching the scale of the Colossi of Memnon. Yet the expression on the face remains calm, controlled, almost gentle, a contrast to its overwhelming physical presence. The discovery raised questions about how many colossal statues may still lie buried at Kom El Hettan. Excavations in recent years have uncovered additional fragments, including parts of kneeling statues, sphinxes, and throne bases. Each piece contributes to a growing understanding of how the temple once appeared. What is clear now is that Amenhotep III constructed a monumental landscape unmatched in size during his time. The Colossus also reminds researchers of the fragility of archaeological sites. Kom El Hettan suffered significant damage from ancient floods, earthquakes, and modern agricultural development. The 2010 discovery offered a rare opportunity to study a piece that survived despite these pressures. Conservators continue to work on stabilizing the statue's fragments, some of which may eventually be displayed to the public. Visitors who see the cleaned pieces often describe a sense of disbelief. The scale, the material, the precision, all of it seems nearly beyond the capabilities of a Bronze Age civilization. But the statue stands as a quiet witness to a period when Egyptian craftsmanship reached extraordinary levels. In its calm expression and monumental form, the colossal quartzite statue embodies the ideals of Amenhotep III's reign: stability, divine connection, and the enduring presence of kingship. And though it lay hidden beneath the mud for over 3,000 years, its re-emergence offers a renewed look at a pharaoh whose influence still shapes our understanding of ancient Egypt. The giant Egyptian block statue of Senenmut. In the museums that house Egypt's most well-known artifacts, block statues often appear small, compact, and easy to overlook. They sit low to the ground, knees drawn to the chest, arms tucked in, their bodies carved into simple geometric forms. But one statue breaks that pattern, a massive granite block statue, over 4 feet tall, depicting the official Senenmut holding a royal princess. It stands as one of the largest and most unusual block statues ever created in ancient Egypt, and its presence carries a quiet weight that reflects both the power and the secrecy surrounding Senenmut's life. Senenmut served under Hatshepsut, the female pharaoh who ruled during the 18th dynasty. He rose from non-royal origins to become one of the most influential officials of his time, chief architect, royal tutor, steward, and administrator of monumental building projects. His rise was unprecedented, and the statues dedicated to him especially, this oversized block statue, reveal the extent of his authority. Carved from dark granite, the statue shows Senenmut seated in the traditional block form. But unlike typical examples, which are usually small and intended for chapels or tomb niches, this one is monumental. Its size makes the figure appear like a sculpted presence rather than a functional offering statue. The polished surfaces and careful shaping show the work of skilled craftsmen who understood the challenges of granite carving. What sets the statue apart even more is the small child held within the folds of Senenmut's cloak. This child is Princess Neferure, daughter of Hatshepsut, a royal figure who played an important role during the early years of her mother's rule. Her presence openly linked Senenmut to the heart of the royal household, a relationship rarely shown on public monuments. The pose is simple yet meaningful. Senenmut's arms wrap around the princess, the cloak forming protective curves over her small figure. Neferur stands upright, her hand raised in a gesture of childhood, her sidelock visible beneath the carved hood. To ancient viewers, this was a powerful image, a trusted court official shielding the heiress of the kingdom. Block statues were designed as places where the deceased could receive offerings. Their compact shape symbolized eternal endurance, a form that resisted time and kept the soul anchored to its image. In most cases, officials commissioned modest examples placed in temple precincts. Senenmut, however, commissioned several, reflecting his high status. This giant granite version is the most striking, its unusual size suggesting a level of privilege granted only by direct royal favor. Archaeologists studying the statue note the subtlety of the carving. The surfaces are smooth and broad, but the details, the princess's delicate features, the folds of the cloak, the inscriptions are precise. The statue is likely placed in a temple context, perhaps at Karnak, or in a shrine connected to Hatshepsut's mortuary temple. Its role may have been both religious and political, a declaration of loyalty, a symbolic guardianship of the royal lineage, and a claim to lasting memory. Senenmut's career, however, remains partly shrouded in mystery. He rose quickly, accumulated titles, and left behind architectural achievements such as the terraces of Deir el-Bahari. Yet near the end of Hatshepsut's reign, his name disappears from records. His tombs were left unfinished, and traces of his monuments were sometimes erased. Scholars still debate whether his downfall was political, personal, or simply the consequence of shifting power. The giant block statue offers a calm counterpoint to these unanswered questions. It reflects a moment when Senenmut stood at the height of his influence. The inscriptions on the statue praise his roles: chief steward, royal tutor, overseer of works. They emphasize his closeness to the princess, describing him as her caretaker and teacher. In a society where royal children were normally guarded by elite women, this trust was extraordinary. The statue's size may have had symbolic meaning beyond simple scale. In Egyptian art, larger figures often represented higher authority or greater spiritual reach. By enlarging the block statue form, Senenmut may have aimed to demonstrate both his earthly service and his hoped-for eternal presence within the temple's sacred space. The princess's presence within the statue reinforces this intention, a connection to the royal household that extended beyond life. When the statue was rediscovered centuries later, its condition was surprisingly good. Granite weathers slowly, and the statue's compact form helped preserve it. The inscriptions remain legible, and the carving retains its clarity. Standing before it, the viewer feels the dense weight of the stone, the stillness of the pose, and the controlled craftsmanship that shaped it. The block statue form itself has roots in Middle Kingdom traditions, but was refined during the New Kingdom. Its geometric shape was not a sign of simplicity, but a deliberate attempt to express endurance. The giant statue of Senenmut amplifies this idea. It feels grounded, anchored, built to resist time, a presence meant to exist quietly within temple corridors long after the people it portrayed were gone. Today, the statue allows researchers to piece together aspects of Senenmut's life that do not appear clearly in written records. It reveals how he wished to be seen: loyal, protective, and connected to the royal family. It also hints at the complex dynamics of Hatshepsut's court, where political roles blended with symbolic imagery to construct narratives of power. Visitors who encounter the statue often describe it as calm yet imposing. The face of Senenmut is serene, the princess sheltered yet alert. Together they form a single unit of stone, compact, heavy, rooted, a quiet monument to a relationship that shaped the early years of one of Egypt's most remarkable rulers. The giant Egyptian block statue of Senenmut stands not only as an artwork but as a witness. It reflects ambition, devotion, and the delicate ties between royal authority and those who served it. A granite figure holding a royal child, carved to last forever, still carrying the memory of a court official whose life remains both celebrated and shadowed by unanswered questions. The huge obsidian mirror of Teotihuacan. In the ruins of Teotihuacan, the great city of pyramids that rose long before the Aztecs, archaeologists uncovered an object unlike anything normally shown in museum displays. It was a mirror, but not the handheld discs commonly found in Mesoamerican burials. This one was enormous, a human-sized disc of black obsidian, shaped, polished, and mounted into a ceremonial frame. To the people who once lived in Teotihuacan, this mirror was not simply a surface of reflection. It was a portal, a ritual tool used in ceremonies that engaged with the unseen world. Obsidian, formed from volcanic glass, was a material of both practical and symbolic power. It could be shaped into razor-sharp blades, reflective surfaces, and sacred objects that connected the living to the spiritual realm. The reflective quality of obsidian is different from modern mirrors, darker, deeper, like still water at night. Faces appear, but softened by the black background, giving the sense of looking not just at oneself, but through oneself. The mirror from Teotihuacan, measuring nearly the height of an adult person, was discovered in fragments within a ceremonial complex. When reconstructed, it revealed a disc polished with an extraordinary level of skill. Ancient lapidary specialists had worked its surface for dozens of hours, slowly grinding and smoothing until the obsidian produced a reflective plane large enough to show a full human figure. The mirror was likely mounted on a wooden or stone frame, anchored to a wall, or placed upright on a platform. Marks around the edges suggest it was once held by clamps or brackets. This indicates its purpose was not everyday grooming or personal use, it was positioned for communal or ritual viewing. Archaeological evidence from Teotihuacan shows that mirrors held significant value in rituals involving fire, water, and trance. Smaller obsidian mirrors have been found in burials, carried by priests, warriors, and individuals believed to have acted as intermediaries between the community and the supernatural. A mirror of this size suggests something beyond private ritual, a tool used by trained specialists in ceremonies performed before groups. Teotihuacan, at its height between the 1st and 6th centuries CE, was a city of monumental scale. The pyramids of the sun and moon, the Avenue of the Dead, and the palatial compounds all point to an organized society with complex religious systems. The obsidian mirror aligns with this environment, a ritual object reflecting beliefs centered on movement between worlds, where shamans or priests entered altered states through controlled ceremonies. The mirror may have played a role in such trance practices. Ethnographic parallels from later cultures describe ceremonial mirrors used to induce focused states of consciousness. Participants would stare into the dark reflective surface while smoke, chanting, or controlled breathing created a shift in perception. The mirror's depth, combined with flickering light, could create the sensation of motion or shifting patterns within the surface. Researchers propose that the huge Teotihuacan mirror served similar functions. It may have been placed in a dimly lit chamber, where priests used it to conduct rituals involving divination, ancestor communication, or the symbolic journey into the underworld. The reflective surface would have been illuminated by torches or fire bowls, causing the mirror to glow faintly, not with bright reflection, but with a dark shimmer that drew participants inward. Obsidian itself held cosmic meaning in Mesoamerican belief. It was associated with night, the underworld, and gods who governed transformation. The reflective disk may have represented a portal to these realms. The idea was not metaphorical to the people of Teotihuacan. Such objects were actual points of connection. The discovery of the mirror also offers insight into the innovation, city's craftsmanship. Polishing a disc of this size required specialized tools, abrasive materials, and careful control. The makers would have used sand, water, and long hours of repetitive motion to shape the surface. Any mistake could crack the obsidian, ruining weeks of work. That the mirror exists at all speaks to the level of mastery achieved by Teotihuacan artisans. The mirror's context within the archaeological site suggests deliberate placement. It was found near a ritual complex connected to elite residences. This was a place where ceremonies likely involved a restricted group leaders, ritual specialists, or individuals initiated into certain practices. The mirror was positioned so that people standing before it were framed by architectural features, further emphasizing its role in controlled ritual space. Even in fragments, the mirror conveys a quiet presence. Standing near the reconstructed disc, the reflection appears muted and deep. Movements create faint distortions, producing an effect that feels older than the object itself, something intended for slow, focused engagement rather than quick observation. The mirror's survival is partly due to the conditions of Teotihuacan's decline. After the city's central authority collapsed, many ceremonial objects were intentionally broken or buried. The mirror appears to have been smashed and covered, perhaps to deactivate it or prevent misuse. This practice is common across ancient cultures. Certain sacred tools had to be ritually neutralized when their roles ended. The fact that the mirror was buried, rather than left exposed, may indicate its importance. The fragments were placed together, suggesting the destruction was intentional, but controlled. The people responsible understood that the mirror held power, and even in breaking it, they treated it with caution. Today, the mirror helps researchers understand the symbolic world of Teotihuacan beyond its pyramids and murals. It reveals a dimension of belief focused on perception, transformation, and inner vision. It reminds us that the people of Teotihuacan engaged with the unseen in ways both disciplined and profound. Visitors who encounter the mirror often describe a quiet sense of distance when looking into it. Their reflection appears, but blurred, softened by the black surface. It is a reminder of how ancient people may have stood before this same surface, searching for guidance or connection within its dark depth. The huge obsidian mirror of Teotihuacan stands as a testament to a civilization whose rituals remain partly hidden, whose beliefs were expressed through objects that existed between art and ceremony. A polished disc of volcanic glass, shaped by human hands to hold not just reflections, but meaning and perhaps, for those who looked long enough, glimpses of the world beyond. The basalt eagle monument of Hattusa, on a high plateau in central Turkey, surrounded by rolling hills and deep ravines, lie the ruins of Hattusa, the capital of the Hittite Empire. Massive stone gates, long stretches of walls, and carved rock sanctuaries mark the landscape where kings once ruled an empire that stretched across Anatolia and into the Near East. Among these remnants stands one of the city's most unusual monuments, a basalt sculpture nearly 2 meters tall, depicting a great eagle standing firmly upon the backs of 2 lions. To the modern eye, the statue appears both simple and striking. The eagle's body is carved in solid, geometric forms. Its wings are folded, its head facing forward, and its talons grip the lions below with deliberate weight. The lions, carved in low relief, lie beneath the bird, their bodies stretched out, their expressions stylized in the powerful forms common to Hittite art. Archaeologists refer to it as the Eagle Monument, though its exact name and function are unknown. It was found near one of the principal gateways of Hattusa, a location that suggests ceremonial significance. Its placement indicates it was not an isolated sculpture. Instead, it formed part of a larger sculptural program that framed entrances, marked boundaries, and conveyed symbolic authority. The combination of eagle and lions is significant. In Hittite religion and iconography, animals often carried symbolic meaning, connected to gods, royal power, and the natural world. The eagle represented strength, vision, and a connection to the sky, a creature capable of watching over the land from above. Lions, on the other hand, were symbols of kingship and authority. They guarded gates, supported thrones, and appeared alongside divine figures. By placing the eagle atop 2 lions, the sculptors created a layered symbol. Some researchers interpret it as a representation of divine protection, a guardian watching over the city. Others suggest it may symbolize the harmony of different realms: sky, earth, and ruling authority united in a single form. The monument's location near a gateway strengthens this reading. Gateways in Hittite cities were not simply paths, they were ritual thresholds where imagery reinforced cosmic order. The basalt used to carve the statue came from volcanic sources in the region. Transporting and shaping such a large block required considerable effort. The Hittites were skilled stoneworkers, but basalt is a hard material, demanding careful planning and strong tools. The carving style of the monument fits with the artistic conventions of Hattusa during the empire's later centuries. Faces are simplified, muscles are suggested rather than detailed, and the composition emphasizes strength over realism. Despite its size, the monument is not elaborately carved. Its surfaces are smooth and purposeful. What matters is the form, the way the eagle's weight presses onto the lions, the way the animals balance each other, and the sense of stability it conveys. This simplicity reflects the broader aesthetic of Hittite monumental art, where symbolism often carried more importance than surface detail. The monument's discovery raised questions about its original context. Was it part of a pair? Many Hittite gates featured symmetrical arrangements of statues or reliefs. If so, the eagle monument we have today may have once had a counterpart on the opposite side of the entrance. Weathering and centuries of movement across the site have left the context incomplete, but the remaining sculpture hints at a visual program far larger than the surviving evidence suggests. Nearby structures provide clues. Hattusa's gateways often included guardian figures, lions carved into doorframes, sphinxes flanking entrances, and reliefs of gods protecting the city. The eagle monument fits this tradition, but introduces an unusual combination of animals not seen elsewhere in the same form. Its uniqueness suggests a specific role or local significance, perhaps tied to a nearby temple or administrative building. Later cultures in Anatolia and the wider region used eagle-lion combinations in their symbolic art. Some scholars propose that the monument may represent a precursor to these motifs, reflecting early expressions of ideas that later spread across the region. But within the Hittite context, the meaning remains carefully restrained, expressed through form rather than explicit inscriptions. Hattusa itself was a city marked by imposing silence. The high walls, long stone corridors, and carved reliefs seemed designed to produce a sense of controlled space. Rituals performed within the city's gates were structured and formal. The eagle monument, standing near one such threshold, would have been a silent participant in these movements, watching as processions passed, armies marched out, and officials moved between precincts. The statue's current condition reflects centuries of exposure. Basalt weathers slowly, but the surface carries signs of erosion, chips, and fractures. Even so, the overall form remains clear. The eagle still stands upright, the lion still visible beneath its talons. The monument's stability across thousands of years mirrors the qualities it likely symbolized: endurance, protection, and order. Beyond its physical presence, the eagle monument reveals how the Hittites understood their world. They saw cities not just as places to live, but as microcosms of a wider cosmic structure. Every gate, wall, and stone carving reinforced relationships between humans, gods, and nature. The eagle atop the lions may have served as a guardian spirit or as a representation of divine authority, supporting the power of the king. Visitors who see the monument today often describe a sense of quiet strength. The eagle's posture is calm, not aggressive. The lions, though stylized, appear grounded and steady. There is no dramatic movement, no dynamic pose, only a deliberate stillness. This calmness is typical of Hittite art, which often focused on stability, ritual, and order, rather than dramatic expression. The basalt eagle monument of Hattusa stands as a reminder of a civilization that valued symbolic structure as much as physical architecture. It is a simple image, yet one layered with meaning. A bird of the sky standing firmly upon two animals of the earth, carved in stone to watch over a royal city. A sculpture built for endurance, expressing ideas that extend beyond its form, still carrying the silent presence of the empire that shaped it.